Have you ever stood over your frying pan on a Sunday morning, watching your breakfast quite literally dissolve into a puddle of milky white slime and thought, yeah, this is completely normal? You lay down 4 beautiful, thick rashers of supermarket bacon, and by the time the gas flame has done its job, you're left with 2 shriveled, rubbery strips swimming in a lake of salty water. Your kitchen smells less like a traditional smokehouse and more like a chemical plant. You didn't buy meat, you bought a sponge masquerading as pork, pumped full of industrial fluids designed to inflate the weight on the scales, so you pay premium meat prices for literal tap water. In this video, we are going to expose exactly what the British food industry is hiding behind those rolling green hills on the packaging. You'll find out why the no added nitrites label you pay a massive premium for might actually be delivering 3 times more of the exact same cancer-linked chemicals into your body. I'll show you the results of my own laboratory-grade shrink tests across 10 major UK brands, mapping out exactly how much actual meat makes it to your plate versus how much evaporates into thin air. We'll break down the secret chemistry trick known as liquid smoke injection that allows factories to bypass the smokehouse entirely while still slapping traditionally smoked across the front. And you want to stay tuned until the very end, because the most shocking revelation involves the single most popular, trusted British heritage brand on the supermarket shelf, a brand that completely failed our tests despite charging luxury prices. By the time we're done, you'll know more about what's actually inside your grocery trolley than 90% of the shoppers currently standing in the aisles of Tesco or Sainsbury's before we name the guilty parties. Let's get our heads around how a piece of pork actually becomes bacon, and how the industrial food machine completely perverted the process. Traditionally, making bacon is incredibly simple. You take a pork belly or loin, rub it with salt, maybe a bit of sugar, and let it sit. The salt draws out the moisture, concentrating the flavor and preserving the meat. Then, you hang it up in a real smokehouse over burning wood chips for hours or even days. It loses weight during this process because water escapes. That's why real bacon is dense, rich, and historically expensive. It's like buying a high-end, finely engineered sports car where every single component serves a performance purpose. But the supermarkets and mega corporations looked at that traditional method and saw a massive financial disaster. In their eyes, water leaving the meat is money evaporating from their balance sheets. If they sell bacon by the kilogram, they want that pork as heavy and bloated as legally possible. So, they invented the modern industrial curing process, which is essentially the equivalent of taking that sports car, stuffing the body panels with heavy concrete blocks, and pretending it's for structural integrity. Instead of drawing water out, they use multi-needle injection machines to pump a chemical brine deep into the muscle fibers of cheap, factory-farmed pork. They are literally selling you water at the price of meat. To keep that extra water locked inside the cells so it doesn't leak out in the plastic packet, they add water retention compounds like sodium phosphates. Think of these chemicals as chemical magnets for moisture. They hold on to that injected brine until the second you apply heat in your kitchen. The moment the pan gets hot, the chemical bond breaks, the trap snaps open, and all that hidden, chemically trapped water comes rushing out, boiling your bacon instead of frying it. Then comes the smoke trick. Real wood smoking takes time, space, and money. Why bother with a real smokehouse when you can just buy a vat of liquid smoke? This stuff is made by burning wood in a controlled factory, capturing the smoke particles in water, condensing it into a highly concentrated chemical solution, and then either spraying it onto the meat or dumping it straight into the injection brine. It's an illusion. You see words like hickory or traditional oak on the pack, and your brain pictures a rustic smokehouse in the countryside. The reality is a laboratory spray nozzle on an assembly line. This entire industry is built on a framework of legal loopholes and clever chemistry, all designed to make you feel like a savvy shopper while picking your pockets at the checkout till. Let's dive straight into the Hall of Shame, starting with the baseline of supermarket economy lines. If you've ever tried to save a few pennies during a tight month, you've probably reached for Asda Just Essentials smoked back bacon. At around 80 pence for a 300-gram pack, it looks like an absolute lifesaver at the checkout. It's the ultimate budget default, but when I dropped these rashers into the pan, the reality hit immediately. The shrink test was brutal. It lost a staggering 60% of its weight within 4 minutes. What started as a full pan ended up as shriveled ribbons drowning in a thick, cloudy puddle of white goo. Looking at the back label, the mystery vanishes. It's pumped full of added water and sodium phosphates to lock that moisture in. They also use smoke flavoring. That's our liquid smoke friend sprayed on in seconds. If you calculate the cost per cooked, edible ounce, that bargain price completely evaporates. You're paying meat prices for tap water that disappears into steam. This brings us to our first bridge, because if you think spending twice as much protects you from this chemical wizardry, you're dead wrong. Let's talk about Tesco Finest thick-cut hickory smoked bacon. This is packaged beautifully in card sleeves, giving off an artisanal, premium vibe that makes you feel like a conscious consumer. But when I put this to the test, the middle stayed pale and rubbery, while the edges curled up like dry cardboard. According to food manufacturing expert Dr. Chris Elliott, this happens when a factory cuts the meat thick but doesn't extend the smoking or curing time to match. The liquid smoke solution only penetrates the outermost millimeter, leaving the inside completely devoid of flavor and structure. At nearly £3 a pack, you're paying a massive premium for a look that completely fails the moment it hits hot iron. It's form over function, marketed to the eyes but disappointing to the stomach. If you already feel like checking your own fridge to see if you've been conned, hit that subscribe button right now, because it gets significantly worse from here. We need to talk about Richmond thick-cut thick bacon. Richmond is a household institution, famous for its Irish sausages and decades of family trust. It represents comforting, traditional British breakfast culture. But when you flip the packet over and run the math, the illusion shatters. It costs roughly £2.50 a pack, but it suffered a massive 55% shrinkage in my kitchen. The water retention additives act like a structural sponge, artificially bloating the pork until the heat of your stove forces it to dump its contents. But the corporate history is what really opens your eyes. Richmond, once a staple of British food heritage, is owned by Pilgrim's Foodmasters, a subsidiary of Pilgrim's Pride, a massive American conglomerate controlled by JBS SAS, a Brazilian multinational. While the packaging screams comforting local heritage, the strategic profit targets are driven by global corporate boardrooms. The next offender is a brand that sat in my own fridge for years whenever it was on promotion at Morrison's. Hormel isn't huge here, but their equivalent staple that dominates the mid-tier shelf is Wall's pack of hickory smoked rashers. Wall's has been feeding Brits since 1786, and people trust it implicitly for a consistent weekend fry-up. The flavor actually isn't terrible. The smoke hits the tongue cleanly, but the quality control between batches is a complete lottery. One pack cooks up decently, and the next is a salty, wafer-thin mess that falls apart in your hands. What drove me crazy was discovering that Kerry Foods, who used to manufacture Wall's, already engineered a completely clean version with zero stabilizers or artificial accelerators, yet they continue to pump the old, chemical-heavy formula onto the main shelves because it's a cash cow. They know how to make it better, but they keep selling you the watery version because the profit margins are too good to drop. Now we arrive at the most famous, most trusted titan of the British morning routine, Oscar Mayer's closest UK parallel. The legendary Princes or supermarket equivalent giants like Matesson's, but specifically Denby Dale or Simon Howie's mass market lines. Let's look at the absolute king of the shelf, Wall's Smoked Back Bacon Standard Edition. It is the default setting for the British cafe and home breakfast, and honestly, it tastes great. The salt, smoke, and slight sweetness are perfectly balanced. But when you put Wall's standard line side by side with the cheapest supermarket basic line, the ingredient lists are practically identical. Pork, water, salt, preservatives, and antioxidants. The only difference is that the name brand uses a premium synthetic ascorbate variant which slightly reduces chemical compound formation during high heat cooking. You are paying a 50% price markup for a legacy, a memory, and a logo. The industry relies on your childhood nostalgia to mask the fact that the underlying industrial blueprint is exactly the same as the budget basic pack. And now, what it was worth watching all the way through for. We are finally leaving behind the chemical liquid smoke, the injection needles, and the corporate sleight of hand. The transition from those waterlogged disappointment strips to real honest pork feels like a massive reward for your patience. The very first line of defense against the supermarket swindle starts with finding products where the producer actually respects the animal and the consumer. When you drop a quality slice into the pan, the sound changes completely. There is no wet, sputtering, aggressive popping sound as water fights hot oil. It's a steady, calm, confident sizzle that tells you immediately that the meat is doing the cooking, not a chemical brine reservoir. The first brand to earn its spot on our recommended list is Aldi's specially selected dry, cured back bacon. Aldi has built a massive cult following in the UK for a reason, and their premium tier is where they genuinely disrupt the market. Instead of pumping the meat full of liquid weight, their dry-cured range is rubbed with salt by hand, and allowed to cure naturally over time. When I put this to the shrink test, it lost roughly 35% of its weight, which is a massive leap forward compared to the 60% evaporation we saw with the basic economy lines. The texture is firm, the fat renders down into a beautifully crisp golden edge, and the smoke flavor feels authentic because it doesn't leave that harsh, chemical aftertaste at the back of your throat. At around £2.50 for a pack, it is easily the most affordable entry point into the quality tier. The honest downside is that Aldi's stock can be highly inconsistent. You might walk in on a Tuesday evening and find the shelf completely bare, forcing you to gamble on their standard line. But when it's there, it is an absolute steal for any budget. If you want to step up the ladder to something easily accessible in almost every major town, we look at Marks & Spencer's Selection Dry Cured Applewood Smoked Bacon. M&S has a long-standing philosophy of strict agricultural standards, and this product proves they aren't just slapping a fancy label on standard factory meat. They use British outdoor-bred pork, and the ingredient list is remarkably short: just pork, salt, a touch of sugar, and the necessary preservative compounds. There are absolutely no industrial phosphates or added water listed on the back. When you cook it, the aroma in your kitchen changes entirely. You get a gentle, natural sweetness from the applewood smoke that unfolds in layers rather than hitting you like a sledgehammer. Independent consumer panels regularly rate it as a top-tier supermarket choice because the ratio of lean meat to fat is meticulously controlled. It will cost you closer to £3.50 or £4 a pack, meaning it is more expensive on the shelf, but because it doesn't shrink into nothingness. The actual cost per edible portion matches or beats the mid-tier brands that try to trick you with water. But what if you were one of the thousands of people who switched to no added nitrites options because of health warnings, only to get caught by the hidden chemical trap? This is where Finnebrogue Artisan Naked Bacon enters the conversation, available at Sainsbury's, Tesco, and Waitrose. Finnebrogue looked at the traditional curing process, saw the genuine health concerns surrounding synthetic nitrites, and invested millions into finding a genuine alternative using natural fruit and spice extracts to cure the meat safely. When you open a pack of naked bacon, you get a completely fresh, clean meat smell with zero chemical edge. In the pan, it behaves beautifully, holding its shape with minimal shrinkage. The flavor is light, clean, and tastes like real high-quality pork that hasn't been buried under a mountain of industrial salt. It is expensive, often hitting nearly £4 for a smaller pack. And because it lacks traditional preservatives, its shelf life is noticeably shorter. You have to eat it within a couple of days of opening, but that is the honest price you pay for a genuinely cleaner product that doesn't use the clever legal loopholes of hidden celery powder. Finally, for the absolute pinnacle of British bacon craft, we have to look outside the mass-market grocery chains to Duke's Hill, a traditional British producer that holds a royal warrant. This is the kind of bacon you see on the menus of high-end boutique hotels and luxury brunch spots in London. Duke's Hill uses the traditional dry cure method, but they take it a step further by curing the meat for several weeks, and then smoking it over real oak logs in traditional smokehouses for up to 2 days. The result is a deep, rustic reddish-brown rasher rather than a pale, artificially colored pink strip. When you drop a slice of Duke's Hill into a hot skillet, there is absolutely zero liquid runoff. The shrink test measured an astonishingly low 25% loss. The flavor arrives in a distinct, beautiful sequence: rich pork first, followed by deep, authentic oak smoke, and finishing with a perfectly balanced saltiness. It is a luxury item, costing significantly more than supermarket options, and you generally have to order it online or find it in high-end food halls. It is not an everyday purchase for a tight budget, but it is the gold standard that proves what bacon can be when corporate greed is completely stripped out of the equation. If you want to stop being a victim of the industrial supermarket con and take total control of your Sunday morning fry-up, you need to arm yourself with a few non-negotiable rules before you next walk through the doors of Tesco, Asda, or Sainsbury's. Take a mental screenshot of these guidelines because they will completely transform how you shop. Rule number 1. Flip the packet over and immediately check the actual percentage of pork. If the label reads 87% pork or lower, put it straight back on the shelf. You are paying premium meat prices for an industrial reservoir of chemically trapped tap water. Rule number 2. Avoid any packet that lists sodium phosphates or potassium phosphates in the ingredients list, as these are the exact chemical anchors used to artificially bloat the meat until it completely dissolves into white slime in your hot pan. Rule number 3. Look specifically for the words "dry cured" on the packaging, which is your ultimate green light indicating that the moisture was drawn out naturally over time rather than injected mechanically via multi-needle factory lines. Rule number 4. Be highly cynical of no additives nitrites labels and scan for hidden botanical loopholes like celery powder or fermented celery juice, which your digestive system processes identically to standard chemical preservatives. Rule number 5. Look for genuine independent marks of quality on the packet, such as the Red Tractor certification or Outdoor Bred stamps, which guarantee a significantly higher base standard of pork before it ever reaches the processing plant. Rule number 6. Look at the liquid level in the plastic packaging before you buy. If there is already a puddle of cloudy moisture pooling at the bottom of the tray before you've even opened it, that product is unstable and will inevitably boil instead of frying. When you look at the British meat industry as a whole, the entire system is engineered to prioritize factory efficiency, inflated package weights, and massive corporate profit margins over real flavor and consumer health. The reason your breakfast routinely shrinks into nothingness is not because you don't know how to cook, but because major supermarkets rely on clever chemistry and deceptive marketing to sell you water masquerading as heritage meat. To break out of this trap, you only need to make one simple shift in your thinking. Stop looking at the price per pack on the supermarket shelf and start calculating the actual cost of the edible meat that makes it onto your plate. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today and digging into the reality behind our grocery store shelves. If you have a friend or family member who still buys the cheapest economy rashers thinking they are pulling off a brilliant budget hack, please share this video with them right now so they can see the truth behind the chemistry. I want to hear from you down in the comments section below. Which specific brand of bacon is sitting inside your fridge right now, and did its ingredient list completely shock you when you flipped it over? If you want to see exactly what else the big food corporations are hiding inside your daily routine, click on our next video where we run an identical laboratory expose on supermarket sausages. Vote with your wallet, check the back label,